Hello and welcome to the Standard Education Talks. In this episode, we dive into the emergent curriculum, child-led inquiry, and multilingualism with early childhood education expert and author, Dr. Stephanie C. Sanders-Smith. Hello, Stephanie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Hi, and welcome. Let's start off with your recently published book along with the other two authors, the Yew Chung Approach to Early Childhood Education. So how did it come about? What's so valuable about the school's approach to early childhood teaching and learning that makes you want to undertake this research?
So this project started, it's been many years at this point. So I came to the University of Illinois in 2014, and then in 2015, I became the Yew Chung Bernard Spodak Scholar of Early Childhood Education at the University of Illinois, which is a position that is funded in part by an endowment from Dr. Betty Chen in honor of her mentor, Dr. Bernard Spodak at the University of Illinois. And it was through that relationship that I first met Dr. Betty Chen, and then was subsequently introduced to her niece, Dr. Lydia Chen, in 2015. And we discussed some of the work that was happening at Yew Chung. I visited some of the kindergarten classrooms, and I learned that the administrators and the teachers recognized that the approach that they were doing was special and that it was unique. But sometimes when you are inside of the practice, it becomes very difficult to explain it to people on the outside. So I was invited in as an external researcher to help the leadership and the teachers kind of put to words the work that they were doing. My area of scholarship is early childhood teaching methods, early childhood pedagogy, and the ways that we teach children link to children's culture. And so I had previously done work in Chicago. I had studied the schools in Reggio Emilia, and so this was a natural fit for me to think about this particular program. How this teaching method functioned, the ways that the teachers and the children worked together, and how that functioned within the context of Hong Kong.
Right. So you mentioned that really talking about the approaches is very difficult and challenging. And I think it's very great because I went through the whole book and I really like it because given the many real-world example and contests that you have taken from the school. Now, I think the main question is, and I know a lot of audiences watching this is interested in knowing is, what is an emergent curriculum and how would you define it?
So an emergent curriculum is a curriculum that emerges from the children or emerges from the students. And it's not a new concept. It goes back to work that John Dewey was doing in the early 20th century. And so in Yew Chung and some other progressive schools in the world, there might be an interest that the teachers recognize that the children have. So in the book that we talked about, their Starbucks project, and that was an interest that arose from the children because one of the children, his mother, was stopping at Starbucks every day on the way to work. Or it might be a learning opportunity that the teachers present to the children, and so that was the snail project that we talked about in the book. That was something that the teachers had brought in, but then the children drive the investigation of that topic, and so it really becomes, even when it's presented from the teachers, the investigation of it is what the children are interested in. So, why do people, how do we make drinks and how do we make aprons? Or, do snails like music? And if we leave the top off of the cage, what happens? But teachers who use an emergent curriculum are very, very skilled, have a deep understanding of the content knowledge that children are learning in early childhood programs. And so they embed the skills and the competencies that children are gaining through early childhood, so numeracy and literacy, into the project work.
Right. So what you're saying is, and I think the thing about emergent curriculum is that it's very much about the cycle of inquiry, listening to children, thinking about children, and really caring about children, and trying to respond to that. But then, it's also very intentional on the teacher's part in terms of being a listener and a watcher and a thinker.
Yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes there are misconceptions about emergent curriculum and about inquiry-based work, that children just kind of do whatever, or that, whatever the children want to do is what happens. And that key word is what you just said, is that there is teacher intentionality, and the teachers have academic goals and objectives for the children, and so they know what the end point is going to be, but they use the emergent work as the path to get there, and through this highly skilled work are able to be more flexible and to work together in collaboration with the children.
Right, so it's a very collaborative process.
Exactly.
And it's a responsive process that's very much embedded in the cycle of inquiry.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned in the book that really focusing on this practice shouldn't be considered a real Yew Chung approach to early childhood education.
That's right. The emergent curriculum is part of the Yew Chung approach, and as we said in the book that sometimes schools will attempt to use an emergent curriculum. But what's foundational to the Yew Chung approach is the deep respect for children and the recognition of children's competencies. And if a school is attempting to use an emergent curriculum but hasn't also done that while thinking about children's competencies and haven't done it with a sense of respect for the children, that is not the Yew Chung approach. That is something else. That this is an approach that has a deep respect for children as co-learners, as rights holders, and as people who, while are learners because they're young children, but have an equal right to citizenship with the teachers and have an equal right to personhood. Right. And so that is part of the approach. And doing an emergent curriculum in multiple languages is also a hallmark of the Yew Chung approach.
Right. So it's really not the same without the values that underpin it.
Exactly.
And I have this quote from your book, which is, teachers believe in children as highly capable and active agents in their own learning. So this teacher-student relationship is really an integrated part to implementing an emergent curriculum.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think my next question is, and I think you just mentioned, because Yew Chung is very unique. It adopts a very unique bilingual co-teaching mode where a classroom is being led by two co-teachers, one Cantonese and one English.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think Mandarin teacher, Putonghua teacher, they come into the classroom several times a week too.
Yes, absolutely.
So what is the relationship between language learning and emergent curriculum?
Well, through this approach, and one of that's very special about this approach is that the emergent curriculum and the multilingual model work together. So as children are investigating a topic, that they are able to come to that investigation in multiple languages. So whatever the topic of interest is, the English language teacher might, lead or, support children in a part of the inquiry, but then the Cantonese language teacher might lead a different part of the inquiry. And so the children might, are able to encounter kind of similar ideas, but in multiple languages, and it pulls children's interest toward perhaps their additional language. So a child who, is mother tongue is English and speaks only English at home, but they see their Chinese teacher engaging in this inquiry on a topic that they find very interesting. Well, they're going to engage with that teacher, and they're going to engage with their new language.
Right. So this is very different from a more, I suppose, traditional rote learning that helps students to remember perhaps syntax, semantics, or vocabularies primarily through the use of repetition.
Yeah, the intention here is that the children learn a language by using the language, and I mean, like many skills, children recognize the usefulness of it, and they see that they need the language to be able to engage with everything that's happening in the classroom.
Right. And I think play also is an important part of this emergent curriculum and multilingualism using in the classroom. And you just mentioned that example in the beginning of our discussion about that Starbucks play experience, where a students fascination with coffee shops based on going to Starbucks every morning with his parents has led to this extensive play across the whole school that includes, it has left such an indelible impression for me.
Yes,
It's just an extensive play. It includes creating a menu with prizes, creating the green apron from scratch, from the ground up, and also writing to Starbucks staff, asking for cups and straws and carriers.
Well, and it was so amazing with the then writing to the Starbucks staff is that then led to a new inquiry of because the students went from the Starbucks experience to post office because they had this experience of writing a letter and having a response.
So it all goes back to the children's questions. What are they questioning about? Why is this particular group fascinated with a certain thing, and what are they understanding and what are they not understanding?
Right.
And trying to respond to that. By moving between multiple languages throughout the school day inside the classroom, it also the benefits of it also extends into the social emotional domains. So
yes, the students are able to build relationships with both of their class teachers. They're able to build friendships with all of the children in the classroom, and not just the children who might have their same mother tongue. And children learn from other children, and then they are able to use those languages to think through with peers, academic problems and social problems, and again, having to apply the language that they're using rather than just doing grammar exercises.
Right. And I remember an example from the book, which is that a child is upset because someone takes his belongings, and then instead of the teachers helping him to directly solve it, he or she, the teacher provides him with the linguistic tools that he needs to articulate his feelings.
Yes, absolutely. And that comes from, the Yew Chung teachers, they're very knowledgeable about developmental theory. And what we know about young children is that sometimes they have difficulty kind of making their internal speech more active. And so this is where you see children who talk to themselves a lot. And so sometimes when a child is upset, it really helps them for the teacher to come and say, "Oh, I see you're upset. I see that so and so took your toy and that you're upset," and then the child is able to put words to what's happening. It's like, "Oh, yes, I am upset. That's what I'm feeling," and then they're better able to respond.
Right. So bit by bit, they're able to solve the problem by themselves and build up this skill set in social and emotional categories. Right. So you haven't gone into a number of classrooms inside the school to observe this interaction between teachers and students, and also classroom activities and investigations. How would you describe that relationship?
It's very close. It's loving and nurturing. You're walking into a classroom when I was here several years ago, and a child was upset because I think she missed her mother that day, and because some days are hard, and she was curled up in her teacher's arms, and so that's the teachers recognize when that's a need, but they also recognize other kinds of needs. So there are teachers who will run and play and get on the floor with the children and will be responsive to those kinds of emotional needs as well.
Right. So I suppose there is this relationship of trust and respect.
Exactly.
And this bone-deep belief in children's own agency and learning.
Yes, and the children feel that that they can go to their teacher for help, or they can go to their teacher to share something exciting or an idea that they had.
Right. So we talked about multilingualism. We talked about emergent curriculum, and I suppose a more common misconception with emergent curriculum is that academic skills are often overlooked, but from your observation, it's actually the complete opposite at the school.
Yeah, I think, and that can be a misconception with emergent curriculum, that you do whatever it is that the children want to do, and to the expense of what we might traditionally call academic skills, and it's not the case. Of course, through the emergent curriculum, many of those academic skills are embedded in, but the teachers are also very intentional about making sure that the children do encounter different kinds of academic skills at increasing complexity while they're in the kindergarten. And that might be through the investigation, but teachers also don't wait around for things to come up in investigation. If a child needs, to work on an academic skill, then the teacher will provide that opportunity to them and make sure that the children are addressing, the range of competencies.
Right. So one thing you just mentioned and I want to touch on is within children's interests and within this interest that teachers are exploring, they are making sure that children are exposed to the fundamentals of academic skills, whether it's languages, whether it's mathematics, equations, or whatever. So they are exposed to these fundamentals and they're able to get a lot more from the learning experience, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's a very difficult way of teaching. The teachers are very, very highly skilled. They're very knowledgeable. They're up to date on the most recent research on child development. It's for the teachers. It's a very rigorous way of teaching and way of thinking.
And I think with so much going on throughout the school days, they have to take time out to document students' progress, and they have to take time to really sit together and discuss.
Yes, and the teachers document throughout the school day and then reflect on the documentation continuously. We don't share it in the book because the book project was kind of already conceptualized, but we did collect documentation from the teachers on the response to the pandemic, and they had from 2 classrooms we had over 1,000 pages of documentation.
Right. Cool. And Stephanie, I think we have covered quite a lot of grounds and we are quickly approaching the end of the episode. So something to round up our discussion today. How do you think your discoveries into the Yew Chung approach to early childhood education will bring to educators, parents, or teachers around the world?
Well, I mean, my role as this external researcher is really to help the school in sharing the approach widely. I mean, the Yew Chung approach is the school is 90 years old. It's 90 years this year. It has evolved over 90 years as Dr. Chen and other leadership have learned more about development and ways of teaching and learning. I expect the approach will continue to evolve. And it's this wonderful gem of a school that has been here for many years. And I am really hoping that that through my work that more people will know about the work that's happening at the Hong Kong school and the schools in the mainland.
Right, and I think the education sector at large, not just in Hong Kong and around the world, will be able to draw a lot from your findings and research and also this book. Thank you for sharing, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So thank you audiences for listening, and we'll see you next time around.